Can you pretend to be my date for tonight?
Welcome, friends. Tonight's story is one that'll touch your heart deeply. A story of pain, courage, and unexpected love. She stood on the busy city street, holding her phone tightly, trying to keep her tears from falling. Her heart was racing. Her ex was at the restaurant across the street, laughing with his fiancée while she stood alone. Forgotten, she whispered to herself, I can't face him like this. Not again. Just then, she saw a man sitting on a bench nearby, dressed in a gray suit, calm, confident, sipping his coffee. She didn't know why, but something about his presence felt safe. Gathering all her courage, she walked toward him. Excuse me, she said softly, her voice trembling. I know this sounds strange, but can you please pretend to be my date tonight? He looked up, surprised. For a moment, their eyes met, her eyes full of pain, his full of quiet curiosity. Why? He asked gently. She swallowed hard. My ex is in that restaurant. He's getting engaged tonight, and I just can't let him see me broken again. The man paused. Then he smiled faintly and said, all right, I'll be your date tonight. She couldn't believe it. A stranger, a man she'd never seen before, was willing to help her heal her pride and pain. As they entered the restaurant together, whispers followed them. Everyone turned to look. The girl who was once left alone now walked with a man who carried an air of quiet strength. Her ex froze for a moment, his smile fading. The stranger gently pulled out her chair, looked at her, and said, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're already enough. Her eyes welled up. For years, she had waited for someone to say those words, and she didn't even know that the man sitting beside her, the stranger who saved her tonight, was a CO, a man who could have been anywhere else, but chose to be there for her. That night wasn't about pretending anymore. It was about two broken souls finding comfort in each other's silence. Sometimes kindness from a stranger becomes the beginning of healing. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Channel Soul of Kindness. Let's move to the second scene of this emotional story, the night that changed both of their lives forever. They walked into the restaurant together, hand in hand. Her heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. Every step felt heavy, the same place where she had once been humiliated, where she had once cried alone. Tonight she was walking in with someone who made her feel seen. Everyone turned to look. The clinking of glasses slowed. Even her ex, the man who had once broken her heart without a second thought, froze in his seat. His fiancée smiled awkwardly, confused by the sudden silence. The stranger beside her leaned closer and whispered, just breathe. You're doing fine. She smiled weakly, trying to hide the tears that burned behind her eyes. Her ex walked toward them with a smirk. Wow. Didn't expect to see you here, he said coldly. And who's this? Before she could speak, the stranger stood, offering his hand politely. I'm her date for night. There was calm confidence in his tone, a quiet power that made everyone around take notice. The ex forced a smile, but his eyes betrayed the sting of regret. Well, good for you, he muttered before walking away, pretending not to care. She looked at the stranger, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. I didn't have to do that. He smiled softly. Sometimes standing beside someone is all it takes to help them remember their worth. For the first time in years, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about dignity, healing. They sat down, and for a while neither of them spoke. The soft music played, candles flickered, and the city lights outside painted golden reflections on the glass walls. Finally, she said quietly, you don't even know me. Why did you agree to help? He looked down at his cup and whispered, because once I was the one who needed someone to stand beside me, and no one did. His voice cracked a little, the kind that hides years of silence. Success and loneliness. That moment wasn't just kindness. It was connection. Two people who had been broken in different ways, and somehow finding comfort in the same night. She smiled through her tears and said softly, maybe tonight wasn't a coincidence after all. He looked at her with gentle eyes and replied, no. Some meetings are written long before we ever understand why. And in that quiet restaurant, surrounded by laughter that wasn't theirs, two strangers began to heal what life had once shattered. Welcome, friends. This is the final and most emotional scene of our story, the moment where truth, healing, and love all come together. The night was over. The restaurant lights were dimming as the guests slowly left. She and the stranger, the man who had stood by her side all evening, walked out into the cool night air. The city was quiet, except for the faint hum of cars and the sound of her heels echoing on the pavement. She stopped near the same bench where they had first met. The place had started it all. Thank you, she said softly, holding back tears. You have no idea how much tonight meant to me. He smiled gently, looking up at the sky. You don't have to thank me. You just needed someone to remind you of your strength. It was always there, you just forgot. Her eyes shimmered in the streetlight. Still, I don't even know your name, she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, Ethan. She smiled faintly. Ethan, I wish I could repay your kindness somehow. He hesitated, then chuckled softly. You already did. You made me feel human again. There was a sadness behind his words. She could sense it, the kind of sadness that comes from years of loneliness hidden behind success. He continued, everyone sees the suit, the company, the cars, but no one ever sees the man behind it. Tonight I wasn't a CEO, I was just someone who wanted to help. Tears finally fell from her eyes. You were more than help. You were hope. The silence between them was filled with unspoken emotions, gratitude, connection, maybe even something deeper that neither dared to name. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She smiled genuinely. You know, she said softly, maybe some people come into our lives just for one night, to remind us that kindness still exists. He looked at her, eyes soft. Or maybe he said, some people come into our lives to stay, we just don't realize it yet. A tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, I hope you stay. He smiled, stepping closer. And for a moment the world disappeared. No pain, no past. Just two souls standing under the quiet glow of streetlights, healing each other without words. That night didn't end in promises or grand gestures. Just a quiet understanding that sometimes strangers meet for reasons even fate can't explain. Because kindness always finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Channel Soul of Kindness.